First of all, I apologize. I'll get that haircut as soon as I can. Now that we've established that there is such thing as objective reality, because we require consensus to communicate, and there is such thing as objective morality, because we have to agree on a moral code in order to live in a utopia, we come at last to the final question of merit within this type of subjective objective reasoning. Is there such thing as objective quality? Now, I'm going to explain what I mean by quality in a second, but as is the case for morality, when I say objective quality, I of course mean absolute quality, a sense of quality that sort of everyone ought to adhere to. Just like with morality, there's a absolute moral framework to which everyone must adhere to if we are to live in a morally perfect society, morally perfect world. So what is quality? So every single object, every single good, let's say, that people produce, every single product has an intrinsic property called quality, right? Now, for some goods, the question of what is quality, it's usually a question of, well, how good is a certain product, or how good is it at doing what it tries to do? You know, does it break down to the laws of physics? Does it break down out of entropy? Does it, you know, if it's a chair, does it support your weight? If it's a meal at a restaurant, does it fill you up? Does it taste good? You know, etc., etc., stuff like that. So, you know, we ask, you know, every value judgment that people make overall, besides whether something is, well, I'm going to say every value judgment people make usually concerns itself with what is the quality of a certain object. And this is obviously different from value judgments about whether or not someone is a good person, or whether or not, you know, someone is a bad person, whether someone is acting in a good or bad way, although it is related, right? So quality and morality are intimately related, right? You know, because we can say that a good society is, well, or let's think about it like this. You could say that if I'm a manufacturer and I'm manufacturing chairs, then I'm obviously a better manufacturer, a gooder manufacturer, if the chairs that I make are good chairs, if they satisfy the qualities of being a chair and they do so for a long time, right? If they support their weight, if they're sturdy, you know, quality control, right? If my chairs are crappy and they break down very quickly, then that is a bad quality chair, and that makes me a worse manufacturer, right? So good, bad is related to quality. Now, I'm going to say that there are two fundamental types of quality. There is, well, there's not two. Technically there's five, the more I think about it. Quality is obviously a relation to, it's obviously related to preference, right? It's obviously related to human need. You know, you have Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for instance, which says that, you know, people desire certain things. People desire food, people desire water, people desire shelter. So, you know, goods that provide these things are high quality goods. Goods that don't are low quality goods. Insofar as the quality we're talking about is the good's ability to provide, you know, sustenance or shelter, if we're talking about the lowest level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If we're talking about the higher level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, well, then we're no longer talking about we are no longer talking about quality in the same way, right? Because the highest level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that is the level of self-actualization. That is where you have morality, that is where you have art, that is where you have, you know, sort of abstract intellectual things like this. So a person, a product that is, a product can have a high quality if it satisfies anything on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Some products may satisfy multiple layers of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There is also, of course, aesthetic quality. and so on and so forth. There's tons of different categories of quality that you can think of. A chair can be a chair that's sturdy and good, but it can also be a beautiful chair, right? So there's these two fundamental distinctions. It's an aesthetic one, or it's a sort of an ergonomic one, or one where the product accomplishes what it's supposed to be sort of meant for. Right, yeah. So, the point I'm making is that aesthetics is fundamentally related to morality. It is a subcategory of moral reasoning. Any good moral framework, period, actually, should contain with it a theory of aesthetics. It should contain with it some kind of reasoning about how we should look at art, right? Stefan Molyneux has one, except his theory about how we should look at art is stupid as hell, and I don't have anything nice to say about it. And I did a whole video about that, and it's a very, very bad framework, and I don't want to get into why, but the point is aesthetics is really complicated, and what I'm interested in here specifically is aesthetic value of art, aesthetic value of, movies, film, books, television, video games, artistic quality of storytelling. And music and, everything else. But storytelling in particular, that's my main sort of area of interest, I'd say. And so the question I'm posing is there such thing as an absolute objective sense of quality for aesthetics? Now, a lot of people, libertarians included, are automatically going to say, no, value is subjective, no. But, well, okay. Sure, value can be subjective. Preference, there is obviously some degree of preference that is subjective and relative. But the question is whether or not, how much of what we value should be preferential and subjective, and how much of it shouldn't be. How much of the types of art that we enjoy should be up to our own decision, up to our own preferences, or how much of it do we have to all agree upon, right? And some people are going to say it doesn't matter, if someone else loves something that you hate, doesn't make a difference. It's great that they love that. It's perfectly okay. And I say to that is ridiculous and insane. And I'll explain why in a sec. But in essence, what I think, obviously you can't have a world where everyone likes the same thing, 100% of the time. Or that everyone thinks everything is everyone agrees upon the quality of a work all the time, right? So everyone thinks that, Atlas Shrugged is the best book ever made, and that Brave New World is the second best book ever made, and so on and so forth, and we go down in a delineating sequence. You can't have that, because if everyone agrees on everything to that extent, obviously we're just living in a society full of clones, which is just going to be some kind of really boring-ass collective, or essentially a world where, every single individual is just a piece of a much greater individual, and we're living in some kind of hyper future, where hyper future hive mind type thing, right? And I mentioned this in the other video, right? You can't have complete 100% agreement, but I think that there should be more agreement than there currently is. In fact, saying that you love something I hate, that is the type of thing that I can't allow. That is not something that is acceptable, morally speaking, right? I'll explain why. But that is not something that's okay. Liking something that I hate, or me hating something that you love, or loving something that you hate. I mean, at the very least, we should all agree on what's good. We don't have to agree on our favorite things, but we can agree on what's good. To illustrate my point, I remember watching a Let's Player on YouTube once upon a time, and he was playing Elder Scrolls Morrowind. And he was talking about, what are good games, and he was saying, well, the best game ever made is probably Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, but my favorite game is Elder Scrolls Morrowind, the one he was playing. And the reason why is because he grew up with that game, he played it first, nostalgia, etc. And that is perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine to have a favorite, but the fact that he willingly acknowledge that there was another game that was not his favorite, that was the best, that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. That's the kind of absolute sense of aesthetics that I'm trying to sort of prove here is, would it be okay if everyone thought the way that this guy did? Would it be okay if everyone, for instance, believed that Legend of Zelda was the best game ever made, but they had their own favorites? Or, you know, they agreed on what games were really bad, or what games were kind of bad, or what games were just eh, and what games were really good, but within each of these categories that I just stated, they could have small deviations between what they liked and what they, you know, people could have small deviations within the categories, but they cannot disagree on categories overall. You can't love something that I hate, at least to that extent, right? You see what I mean? The fact that this guy was able to sort of look past his own nostalgia bias and look at, you know, Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time more objectively, at least that's what I would call it. He was trying to look at it in a more objective sense, sort of thinking about it like, you know, if he were talking to someone else who did not play Elder Scrolls Morrowind when they were young, and he were to suggest a game to them, what would he suggest? He would probably suggest Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, because this person doesn't have the same bias that he does, and so they would probably enjoy the game that is better in an absolute objective sense, right? And of course you have to do this. You have to have some kind of absolute framework for quality. You can't have... Because, I mean, I'll explain why, but it's just... It's very silly that I find it where people will say things like, you know, I like a certain movie, or I like a certain... you know, they'll make a statement of preference. You know, I like anime, and they won't... They don't see that as a moral statement. They don't see that as a normative statement. And I'm trying to... first of all, I'm going to do a small segue here, and I'm going to try and justify that that is, in fact, a moral statement. That is a normative claim. Saying you like something is a moral normative claim, right? If you say this about a person, you say, I like, you know, Jack, for instance, then you're automatically making a normative statement about Jack. You're either saying Jack has qualities that you want, or maybe Jack has qualities that you want to see in others, or Jack is the type of person that you want to be around, any number of things, but it's expressing that you have positive feelings towards Jack of some kind, right? So saying you like Jack is always going to be a moral statement. It's not a statement about reality, right? It's either a descriptive statement or a normative one, and if it's a statement about reality, then it would be a statement of the form, Jack has qualities A, B, and C. Right? Saying you like Jack, that is automatically normative. So it's the same thing when it talks about art. If you say, I like anime, that's a normative statement. That's a moral statement. And I feel like people, and libertarians especially, like to talk about what they like without actually justifying it. You know, the question here is, above and beyond, should you like the things that you like? Right? You know, this is why a free market is such it's an idea I'm so skeptical of, because it says nothing about what people should like. It just says, free market's going to fix all our problems. Well, one of the problems is that some people don't feel like they should justify what they like, or there's no attempt at trying to justify what you like, right? I mean, one thing I love, absolutely, is hearing why people enjoy certain things and, you know, have them change my mind. I mean, there's been plenty of times where I hated a certain piece of art, or I hated a certain, you know, movie, and then I talked to someone who really liked it and they got me to see it in a new way, right? So by empathizing with them and by interpreting the themes of this film through their eyes, I could appreciate it more, right? So that is, a sense, them justifying why they like the thing that they do, and me criticizing it, and what ended up happening was I ended up liking the thing as well. So this is something you can definitely do, and this is something that, you know, people who do reviews or analyses of, you know, literary criticism, what they do is they try to justify what they like and what they don't like, and I don't see that amongst libertarians at all. You know, Lengthy Narther, he said, like, that he likes Game of Thrones, rather. Well, you know, you like Game of Thrones, but should you like Game of Thrones? I mean, have you thought about why you like Game of Thrones? Is it important for you to like Game of Thrones? Is it moral for you to like Game of Thrones? And some of you might honestly say, well, who cares what people like? It doesn't matter. It does matter, though. Because saying you like something it's such an incredible, it's such a powerful statement, to be honest. It's such a powerful statement that you're making about society, not just about yourself. Okay, it's not just an internal thing like, I like something and that statement says something about me and nothing about anybody else. That is not true. Saying you like something says lots of shit about society. Let me explain. If I say I like anime, right off the bat, it means that there have to be other people on the planet that also like anime, right? Because I have to be surrounded by people who like anime to even make the claim in the first place, right? Imagine, for instance, that, people stopped making anime, and everyone who liked it died, and everyone on the planet hated anime, like completely despised it. And the only person who liked it was you. Would you go around talking about how you like anime? No, not at all. Because you would fear criticism or being ostracized, right? Or in the very least, you wouldn't go parading it around and talking about how great anime is when everyone hates it, right? So the principle right off the bat is you can't make a claim of a statement of preference unless there exist other people who agree to that statement of preference, or in the very least there exist people who at least look at that statement neutrally. There cannot be people, like, you cannot be surrounded by people who hate the thing that you like and you claim that you like it. That won't happen, okay? That doesn't happen in life. Like, people don't go around talking about what they like when they are literally surrounded everywhere by haters. That doesn't exist, ever. You know, it's never going to exist because you wouldn't do that. Nobody would do that. They wouldn't go around parading around their preference when they know that they will receive scorn as soon as they say it. But that's just one condition, okay? Let's say everyone needs a small group of friends who can empathize with the thing that they like, right? And then you might say, okay, well, that's it. You know, it doesn't really matter what other people like because, you know, no matter what you like, you're always going to find some small group number of people that also like that particular thing, right? Wrong. It's not just a small number of people. It's a very large group of people. If I say I like anime, that's a huge number of conditions on society. Right off the bat, that means there have to be other people around me that like anime. I can't be surrounded by haters of anime. Number two, there has to be a market for anime to exist in the first place. If nobody was interested in it, it wouldn't be made. Number three, there have to be people who are skilled enough at drawing and talented enough, and writers and production teams, and all these fucking people that are capable of making anime, right? So it is not true at all that saying I like anime is a statement about yourself. It is a statement about society. Okay, first and foremost, it is a statement about you, and it is also a statement about society and what society is like or what it should be like. You know, saying you like anime means that you, for one, agree that there should be other people who like anime, that there should be a market for anime, and that there should be people who produce anime, which is an insane amount of conditions on the physical world, on civilization. And how do you justify that? I mean, it's easy to say, well, I just like this thing and let me, leave me alone. I was talking to a libertarian today who said, libertarians just want to be left alone and they want to leave you alone. But, I mean, you can't do that, right? Because you have shit like this. You know, every statement of preference automatically suggests that people aren't by themselves, that people are never left alone. Right? I mean, I understand, I've heard somewhere that, all libertarians are introverted, and maybe that's why they all want to be left alone, but that's just naive thinking. We live in a collective. We live in a society where everyone depends on one another, and any statement of preference you make automatically, fundamentally affects every other person on the planet. Any statement of preference that you make affects every other person on the planet. You are a market. You are part of a market. You are part of an industry that other people are invested in, okay? The only case in which you truly are left alone is if you live by yourself in the woods, which is why anytime I hear about Ayn Rand's theories, I'm always like, well, so the only way this society makes sense is if people live on their own in little huts in the woods, or like, prowling tigers that traverse the Siberian wilderness. You cannot have a world where people are constantly interacting and have preferential statements say nothing about the rest of the world, okay? So, from moral context, we automatically have to start, if I say I like anime, we automatically have to take that into consideration. Say, oh, okay, well, he likes anime. Okay, what are we going to do about that? Should we continue to produce anime because, you know, Jack over here likes anime? Should we continue to produce anime because Jack likes it? Right? Is it something that belongs in a utopia? Is it valuable? Right? Is it valuable to produce anime just because Jack likes it or because all these other people like it? Is it valuable to produce? Right? You know, does it have an intrinsic value to it? I mean, who gives a shit that there's people who enjoy it? Like, who gives a shit for a second that there's people who enjoy it? Should these people enjoy it? Right? Should people enjoy anime? Should people enjoy Game of Thrones? You know, should people enjoy anything? You know, all these questions of aesthetics are fundamentally rooted in how society functions. And you know, libertarians, this is why I don't get these guys, you know, because all they talk about is the free market, the free market. And I am never going to be okay with that idea, because a free market can be any type of society. You know, a free market can be a society where it's just a bunch of people that want to be on drugs, right? That could be a free market, right? You could have a free market, any kind of preferences can exist in a free market. Whereas what I'm interested in is restricting people's preferences. Not physically, not with laws, not saying that anime is illegal and people who make it go to jail. That's not what I'm suggesting. There's a third option, right? You don't necessarily have to, you know, create laws or do what the libertarian and anarcho-capitalists do to sort of change the world. The third option is to convince people to enjoy certain things and not enjoy certain other things. You know, to affect the culture, to change the culture. That's the third option here. And that's sort of what that's sort of what I'm trying to do. It's never the case that, you know, so it pretty much comes down to it. I was talking to a subscriber today and yesterday, and he was someone who's spoken to Molyneux and another ANCAP. And honestly, I don't know, I have a serious question. I want to know why all of you ANCAPs suddenly started swarming my channel. I'm not saying I hate it, I just don't understand what I did to, you know, pique all of your interests. But what he was basically saying is, you know, he's concerned very much with this idea of a free market and unadulterated freedom, etc., etc. And I hear those words and I just want to puke to myself, because, you know, unadulterated freedom means that there can exist stupid people that will consume stupid products. Or reality TV, you know, frickin' Transformers movies, reality TV, video games that are really bad. You know, House of Cards. I did a whole critique about House of Cards and how that's like overhyped as hell and people shouldn't enjoy that as much as they do, right? That is what actually matters. It's that stuff. It's talking about and restricting what people should and should not enjoy. And that is where morality really comes into question. It is not a question of how should we organize the economic system, the political system. So the way I feel is that libertarians, it's like we're speaking a different language almost, like we're just looking for different things. You know, I'm not saying that a free market is evil or bad. I'm just saying you guys, you know, it's like we're crossing paths, but we're headed in completely different directions. I'm headed over there. I want to, you know, I want to figure out and standardize human preferences. You guys want to go ahead and standardize human economics or whatever. I don't even know. But we are headed in completely different directions. So, you know, honestly, to be honest, I really want to sort of sit down and really talk to an ANCAP or a libertarian and really try and figure out where the heck these guys are trying to go and why they're just, why they have this reasoning. But the way from what it seems to me is that, you know, it's like, again, it's like we're speaking a different language. For us to be able to come to any kind of consensus, one of the two parties just has to completely abandon everything that it stands for and accept the others and just start thinking in a completely different way, right? So, you know, anytime honestly, I'm going to say anytime, if I ever talk to a libertarian again, my first question is going to be, what are you trying to do here? What are you after? You know, trying to convince me to be a libertarian. What is your purpose? Okay, why is this important to you? Because if I understand why it's important to you, then that'll say something about why it should be important to me. And what you believe and why you believe in it are two sides of the same coin. Anyway, but you could see my point. Because, you know, if you're not a libertarian, you can probably already empathize with my reasoning here. Unless you're one of these, like, super fucking relative subjective hippies where it's just like, you know, art is subjective, everyone can like whatever they want. You know, those guys, unless you're one of those guys, then you're gonna just find me offensive, but that aside, people who aren't, you know, in that extreme or the libertarian extreme, I'm talking to you and I'm suggesting there should be an absolute standard for quality. Just like there should be an absolute framework for morality, just like there is an absolute framework for reality. And I kind of agree with sort of contemporary reasoning where each of these things becomes more and more objective with time. You know, there was a time where people were math and physics and, you know, weren't really objective. People didn't take those things as seriously. You know, then people started saying, well, morality is subjective, except now that's changing. Now there's people talking about how morality is becoming more absolute. And then the next, you know, logical step is to talk about whether or not quality itself, whether or not preferences themselves ought to be absolute. That is the next philosophical step. And I think the answer here is yes. And that, again, with the other two, it should be decided by consensus amongst intelligent individuals who are not horribly emotionally biased one way or the other, who are not crazy, who are not possessed by, you know, sociopathy, narcissism, horrible diseases of the brain, of the mind. You get the point, you know. And amongst the people that I'm referring to, who again are smart, you know, not naive, not deluded, not what would you say? Not deluded. No, what was I going to say? Who aren't crazy, who don't have a personality disorder, who aren't, you know, stupid, and they might not agree with me at the start, but in communication with them, I can get them to see my point, right? I can get them to see, oh, okay, I get what he's saying. I can understand, you know, the usefulness of an objective sort of framework for quality. That has always been my intention, and I usually can get that out of people who are, you know, open to that kind of thinking. So that's really the type of person that I want to have a debate with, because, you know, as I said in the other video, I don't want to debate this stuff with people who aren't, who are sort of incapable of change, but I haven't, and I don't know if, honestly, I want to just say that libertarians are just crazy, that they're just, they're just really introverted, and because they're really introverted, they're biased into thinking that their view on what's right is twisted by the fact that they're hyper introverted, and that might be the case, but I don't know enough about them to say that that is true. What I can tell is that they don't agree amongst themselves, but then again, nobody in any sort of following, I mean, most people probably don't, so it's not really the case. I just don't understand why so many libertarians hate Molyneux, even though he seems to be a libertarian and stands for the same things that, I don't know. I don't know. I want to talk to one of them and to really find out what's going on inside their heads, because that is the only place where all this starts. It's not like your arguments are just the iceberg of what you actually stand for, or the tip of the iceberg for what you actually stand for. And I would have to actually know one of these people, you know, intimately know this part of them to understand why they have that type of thought. But going back to the subject at hand, objective quality. it's a pretty neat idea. You know, I mean, I see a lot of people who just sort of say that quality is subjective because they don't want to offend other people. You know, they don't want to have to take a stand. That's something I see very often. It's just like, well, you know, I like A, but it's okay if you disagree with me. And it's just like, no, it's not. It's not okay to disagree. You know, if you just make a statement and it's perfectly okay for anyone to disagree, then your statement has no value whatsoever. Then there's no point in even communicating the statement. If it's so subjective that anyone, literally anyone, is allowed to disagree with you, then you should just keep it to yourself. If it's something that is so personal that you should just keep it to yourself. The whole point of talking about art and literary criticism and video games is that we all have a similar interest, right? We all share interest in something. You know, if I say this is a good work of art, I say that because I know there's going to be people who agree with me, and I want to talk to these people, and I want to empathize with them and interact with them, right? That's like a whole experience. It's interesting to see what other people think and how other people interpret things. There's empathy in that, right? It's a whole relatability thing, right? But if you just say that can be as divergently different as, you know, who cares how different people's opinions are, well, then you can't have that kind of conversation if the person you're with just disagrees with you about everything, right? I mean, so you have to agree on some stuff. And I'm just saying that, you know, we have to agree on reality, we have to agree on morality, and we have to agree on quality. And we basically have to agree on almost everything for a society to be a utopia. Basically everything. The only things we can disagree on, obviously is our own sensory perception, because we don't share brains. But the only thing we can disagree on is what our favorite work of art is, or how exactly do we rank works of art within categories. But we cannot disagree on whether, you know, anime or work of art A belongs in the highest echelon, the highest category of quality, or the lowest category of quality, or the middle category of quality. It has to belong in one of the categories, and we must all agree on which category it belongs in. But we can disagree on how it compares to other things within that category. So if a category includes like 20 movies, we can pick whichever movie is our favorite because it appeals to us personally the most. But we have to agree that it belongs within that category along with those other 20 movies. In the very least, it's very useful to have a formal, objective standard like that. And that's just the idea I want to try to communicate, right? And personally, I mean, say I would never talk about House of Cards or, you know, Interstellar or whatever if I wanted people to if I expected everyone to disagree with me all the time. You know, I wouldn't do that. I want there to be people who do agree with that. And this goes for every person, every reviewer, every analyst, ever. You get my point. Obviously, you could say that maybe I'm being a little too harsh or a little too sort of controlling in how similar the categories ought to be, in how much our own categories have to coincide, right? Maybe we don't have to agree on the highest category. Maybe we don't have to agree, you know, if there's 20 movies in my top movie category, that doesn't necessarily have to agree with your top 20 movies. But it should be close. Maybe he doesn't have to agree with it outright, but it has to be close. And at the very least, like right now, people's preferences are just all over the place. And I would say that they have to be sort of made more similar, made more standardized. And to be honest, another good reason for why is because I think a lot of the reasons why people don't place certain things in higher categories than they deserve is because of ignorance. You know, for instance, you know, classics like Shakespeare. I mean, I have a friend who hates Shakespeare. And I would make the argument that he just doesn't really know Shakespeare or know the time period or the history, or he doesn't understand it enough to appreciate it, right? He is ignorant. He lacks, information, right? If he were to understand the depth, if he were to understand the quality, he would actually appreciate Shakespeare. Sure, maybe it wouldn't be his favorite thing ever, but he would appreciate it, right? That's sort of where this type of reasoning belongs. And returning to my previous example, I used to really hate Tarantino movies, and then I talked to someone who liked them, and they got me to actually enjoy them. I don't think they're amazing. I don't think they're spectacular, the best thing ever made. I don't praise them like a lot of people do, but I don't, call them garbage, right? I appreciate them, right? There is something in them to appreciate it. It's sort of the same thing here. In essence, what to take away from this, the amount by which we need to standardize human preferences needs to increase. It should increase a lot, and to be honest, it will increase. It will inevitably increase and converge as society becomes more and more advanced. And to be honest, I want to know, if you are not a libertarian and you're not inclined to that way of thinking whatsoever, I want to know what you actually think about this. If you are a libertarian, then we should backpedal and we should have another debate, because this is not like, you're not going to accept what I'm saying now, because it's just, again, it's like we've met and we went off in different paths. Right now I'm over here. I'm following this path over here. You're not going to accept this because this is way too far out. We have to backpedal to this point where we converge and then decide where to go. All right? Okay, and that's it. Cheers.